The silence of deep space was not empty, it was heavy. It pressed against the thick metal skin of the UES Valiant, the largest defense platform Earth had ever built. Captain Mark Sterling stood on the bridge, his hands resting on the back of his chair. He watched the main view screen. For a long time, there had been nothing but stars and the distant, gray curve of the moon. Then, they had arrived. They came without warning. 1 second, the radar screens were clear. The next second, the space between Earth and the moon was filled with silver ships. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. They were long and sharp, with smooth surfaces that reflected the light of the distant sun. There was no rust, no paint, and no visible weapons. They looked like perfect, silver needles dropped into a dirty puddle. Mark Sterling was a man who had seen a lot of things in his 50 years. He had fought in the lunar scuffles when mining colonies argued over water rights. He had dealt with pirates and crazies. But this was different. He looked at the sheer scale of the object in the center of the enemy formation. It was a massive ship, the size of a city, floating in the void. "Report," Mark said. His voice was calm, but inside, his stomach felt like ice. Admiral John Vance's face appeared on a smaller screen to the left. John was in Geneva, deep underground in the command center. He looked older than usual, sweat on his forehead. "Captain, we are reading massive energy signatures," John said. "But they aren't charging weapons. At least, not the kind we know. Their shields are up, but they are just sitting there." "Sir, we are being hailed," said Lieutenant Tom Davis. Tom was sitting at the communications station. He was young, usually confident, but now his face was pale as he typed rapidly on his keyboard. "It's not a code. It's a direct broadcast. Wide frequency. Everyone can hear it." "Put it through," Mark ordered. The bridge of the Valiant went quiet. The hum of the air filters seemed to get louder. A voice filled the room. It did not come from the speakers in a human language. It was a cold, mechanical translation, generated by the ship's computer to make sense of alien sounds. The voice was smooth, flat, and utterly arrogant. "Attention, inhabitants of the third planet. You are surrounded. Your technology is primitive. Your defenses are meaningless. We are the Xylarthian Collective. We absorb civilizations to improve them. We do not wish to damage your infrastructure. It is useful to us." Mark gripped the back of his chair until his knuckles turned white. He looked around the bridge. He saw Ensign Sarah Blake at the tactical station. She was shaking, but she was still working. He saw Sergeant Lisa Ray monitoring the shield levels. Everyone was afraid. It was natural to be afraid when a god looked down at you and threatened to squash you. "You have one chance to join the collective," the voice continued. "Do not force us to cleanse this world. Lower your shields. Power down your weapons. Prepare your leaders for processing. You have 20 seconds to comply. Surrender in 20 seconds, or face total erasure." The message cut off. A timer appeared on the main view screen, overlaying the image of the massive alien ship. Big, red numbers began to count down. 0020 on the bridge, nobody moved. It was a paralyzing moment. 20 seconds was nothing. It was the time it took to tie a shoe or take a deep breath. The aliens were giving humanity less than half a minute to decide between slavery and death. Sir Tom asked, looking back at Mark. "What are our orders?" Mark looked at Admiral Vance on the screen. "Captain," John Vance said, his voice shaking slightly. "They have 10,000 ships. We have 200. Our railguns might not even scratch their paint. If we surrender, maybe the people survive. Did you hear them? Admiral Mark asked softly. They want to process our leaders. They want to use us like tools. That isn't survival. That is a slow death. Captain, please, the Admiral said. We have no leverage. They are the Xylarthians. They have conquered hundreds of worlds. We are just dirt to them. 0012 Mark turned away from the screen. He looked at his crew. He saw Tom, the young pilot who dreamed of exploring. He saw Sarah, who had a little girl waiting for her back in Florida. He saw Mike Wilson, the grumpy engineer who loved old rock music. Mark realized something important. The aliens had made a mistake. They had looked at human history, seen the wars and the chaos, and decided humans were stupid. They thought fear would work. They didn't understand that humans, when pushed into a corner, don't just lie down and wait for the end. They bite. They fight. They do the impossible because they don't know any better. The Xylarthians thought this was a negotiation. They thought this was a math problem where the answer was obvious: surrender. 0008 Mike, Mark said, speaking to the internal comms. Are the kinetic capacitors charged? Mike Wilson's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, we are running hot, but they are ready. We can fire the rail guns. But these are just slugs of metal, not fancy energy beams. If their shields are strong. I didn't ask for a physics lesson, Mike, Mark interrupted. Are they ready? Yes, sir. Ready to fire on your command. 0005 Mark looked back at the main screen. The massive alien ship hung there. It was beautiful and terrifying. But it was still just a machine. It had weak points. Everything made of metal had weak points. Admiral, Mark said, looking at the old man in Geneva. You can run the white flag up the pole if you want. But my ship isn't surrendering. The Admiral looked shocked. Captain, you will doom us all. No, sir, Mark said firmly. I am going to teach them a lesson about Earth. 0003 Mark stepped forward and sat in the captain's chair. He strapped himself in. He felt the vibration of the ship's engines. The Valiant was a beast. It was ugly compared to the silver alien ships. It was covered in rust, grease, and scratches. It was built by human hands. Tom, Mark said. Open a channel. Wideband. Let them hear us. Channel open, sir. 0001 The timer ticked down to 0. On the screen, the numbers vanished. The aliens were waiting. They expected a message of defeat. They expected the humans to beg. Mark leaned into the microphone. He didn't shout. He didn't scream in anger. He spoke with the calm certainty of a man who had already made his peace with death. This is Captain Mark Sterling of the Earth defense ship Valiant, he said. We received your message. We have considered your offer. But we have a counter-offer for you. He paused. The bridge was silent. The universe held its breath. Our counter-offer is this, Mark said, his voice hard as iron. Get off my lawn. He turned to Lieutenant Tom Davis. Tom, target their lead ship's shield harmonic frequency. Lieutenant Sarah, match velocity. All batteries. Fire at will. The response was instant. The Valiant shuddered. It wasn't a smooth hum like in science fiction movies. It was a violent, shaking roar. The railguns were huge magnets that accelerated tungsten slugs the size of cars to impossible speeds. In space, there is no sound. But if there were, it would have been the loudest noise in history. The Valiant spat out hundreds of rounds per second. The silver alien ship, which had been so arrogant, so confident in its shields, did not move. It was too slow. It was too arrogant. The black sky was lit up by streaks of white-hot metal. The humans had not surrendered. They had chosen collision. Space is usually silent, a vacuum where sound cannot travel. But inside the bridge of the UES Valiant, the noise was deafening. It was the groan of the ship's hull, the scream of alarms, and the heavy thud of the railgun reload mechanism spinning up again. Captain Mark Sterling held onto his armrests as the ship vibrated violently under his feet. They had just fired the first shot of the war, and now, they had to see if it mattered. On the main screen, the clouds of tungsten slugs traveled through the black void at speeds that defied logic. They were not guided missiles. They had no computer chips, no tracking systems, and no warheads. They were simply heavy pieces of metal moving very fast. The Xylarthian ships, sleek and silver, did not even try to move out of the way. Their commanders probably believed their shields were perfect. They thought primitive human weapons would bounce off harmlessly. Then, the slugs hit. It was not a bright, colorful explosion like in the movies. It was a flash of dull, harsh light. The alien shields flickered, their blue energy rippling like water hit by a stone. Then, the shields shattered. The slugs tore through the delicate silver skin of the massive dreadnought. Huge chunks of debris flew off the enemy ship. The silence of space mocked the violence, but the visual was terrifying. The mighty ship, the size of a city, was bleeding atmosphere and frozen fluids. Direct hit, screamed Lieutenant Sarah Blake. She was typing so fast her fingers were a blur. Their front shields are down. The kinetic impact broke their generator. Mark Sterling didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just watched. Target their engines. Don't let them get away. The aliens were reacting now. They were confused. Their tactical displays probably showed impossible data. They couldn't understand why their shields, which had stopped advanced energy weapons on 100 other worlds, were failing against simple metal rocks. They had expected a fight, but they hadn't expected a bar fight. Squadron leaders, engage, Mark said into the comms. Deep in the hangar bays of the orbital platforms, small, ugly fighters launched. They were called rooks. They were painted black, covered in rust, and looked like flying bricks compared to the smooth alien ships. Lieutenant Tom Hammer Davis was in the lead rook. He squeezed the control stick and felt the familiar pressure of G-force push him back into his seat. His canopy was cracked and held together with tape, but his engines were powerful. "Okay, boys and girls," Tom said to his squadron. "See those silver beauties? They think they are gods. Let's show them we are the storm." The space between Earth and the Xylarthians became a chaotic swarm of dots. The alien fighters launched to meet the human rooks. The alien ships moved with perfect grace, using beams of focused light. They fired at Tom and his wingman. "Break left!" Tom shouted. He yanked his stick. A red laser beam missed his wing by inches. It didn't explode, it just melted the metal where it touched. "Evasive pattern Delta," Tom ordered. "They are tracking our heat signatures. Kill the engines." The rooks did something the aliens didn't expect. They turned off their main engines and fired their thrusters only in short bursts. In the cold of space, without engine heat, the aliens couldn't lock onto them easily. The human ships became invisible drifting rocks. Then, at the last second, they powered up and fired their own weapons. The rooks were carrying a special payload. They weren't carrying bombs. They were carrying dense rods of iron, smaller than the railgun slugs but just as deadly. Tom aimed his crosshairs at the side of an alien destroyer. "Eat this," Tom whispered. He pulled the trigger. His ship shuddered as the cannon fired. The rod slammed into the alien destroyer, punching a hole straight through the hull. The ship didn't blow up immediately, it just started spinning uncontrollably, leaking air and fire. On the bridge of the Valiant, Sergeant Lisa Ray was coordinating the orbital railgun platforms. These were large stations mounted on asteroids and old satellites. They weren't mobile, but they were big guns. "Platform 4, target the cruiser on the right," Lisa commanded. "Platform 2, cover the rooks. Fire." More lines of fire streaked across the darkness. The Xylarthians were panicking. They were used to enemies who used tactics similar to theirs: energy shields, lasers, and polite formations. They had never fought humans. Humans were cheating. Humans were using mass and speed, things shields were often weak against. Admiral John Vance's voice came over the intercom. He sounded breathless. "Captain, they are trying to regroup. The dreadnought is turning its big guns toward Earth." "I see it," Mark said. The massive alien ship was wounded, but it was far from dead. It was rotating slowly, bringing a massive glowing cannon to bear on the blue planet below. If they fired that, millions would die. "Can we stop that shot?" Mark asked Sarah. "I don't know, sir," she replied, fear creeping into her voice. "Their armor is thick." Mike Wilson, the engineer, cut in on the channel. "Captain, their shields operate on a specific frequency. When we hit them with the rail guns, the shields flared at a harmonic vibration. If we hit the same spot, over and over, with the exact same rhythm, we can shatter their hull like glass." "I don't need a science lesson, Mike. Can we do it?" "Yes. But the firing solution has to be perfect. The platforms have to fire in a drum beat, not a stream." Mark looked at the tactical map. The alien ship was charging up. They had maybe 2 minutes before the main gun fired. He looked at the silver ship on the screen. It looked angry. "Lisa," Mark said. "Set the railguns to rhythmic fire. Focus all fire on the nose of that ship. I want them to hit the exact same centimeter, over and over again. Tom, tell your fighters to draw their fire. Keep their point defense busy." "Copy that," Tom said over the radio. "Hey, aliens. Look at me." Tom pushed his throttle to the limit and flew directly at the bridge of the dreadnought. Hundreds of alien drones swarmed up to stop him. It was a crazy move, a suicide run. But it distracted the alien captain just long enough. "Now!" Mark shouted. The railguns roared. This time, they didn't fire in a chaotic stream. They fired in a thumping rhythm. Thump thump thump. The slugs slammed into the nose of the alien ship, one after another, hitting the exact same spot. The first slug dented the armor. The second cracked it. The third shattered it. The fourth, fifth, and sixth ripped through the internal structure of the ship. The glowing cannon, which was charging up to destroy a city, flickered and died. An explosion erupted from the nose of the alien ship. It wasn't a nuclear blast, but a catastrophic failure of their power core. The front third of the city-sized ship simply ceased to exist. It turned into a cloud of glittering dust and twisted metal. On the bridge, the crew watched in awe. They had done it. They had hurt the giants. "Don't stop," Mark said, his voice like steel. "Keep firing." They wanted to play games. "Let's finish this." The aliens were retreating. Their formation was broken. Their perfect silver ships were dented, holed, and burning. They were moving backward, trying to get away from the crazy apes who threw rocks at them. Captain Mark Sterling sat back in his chair. He watched the enemy fall back. He knew the battle wasn't over. The aliens still had more ships. But they had learned something important today. They had learned that humanity didn't surrender. Tom Davis flew his damaged Rook through the debris field, dodging chunks of alien metal. "Hey, Captain," Tom said over the comms, sounding out of breath. "I think we broke their nose." Mark allowed himself a small, tight smile. "Good work, Hammer. Get back here. We aren't done yet." The silence of space returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was filled with the unspoken threat of humanity. The hunters had become the hunted. The Xylarthian fleet was in panic. The remaining ships turned their tails and ran, pushing their engines to the limit. They were fast, faster than anything Earth had built. In a straight race, the human ships would be left behind, eating stardust. The aliens were heading for the edge of the solar system, aiming for the deep void where they could call for reinforcements. If they escaped, they would return with a fleet large enough to turn Earth into a parking lot. Captain Mark Sterling watched the red dots on the tactical map moving away. His face was grim. He knew what that retreat meant. It wasn't a victory, it was just a timeout. "Admiral," Mark said, his voice low. "They are running. If they jump to hyperspace or whatever they use to travel fast, we lose them." On the screen, Admiral John Vance looked just as worried. "Our ships can't catch them, Captain. We are too slow. Even the Rooks don't have the range." "We don't have to catch them," Mark said. "We just have to stop them from leaving." He turned to the engineering station. "Mike, I need that trick. Now." Mike Wilson, the ship's engineer, looked like a mess. His hair was standing on end, probably from static electricity, and his face was covered in grease. He was looking at a screen filled with complex math equations. He was sweating profusely. "Captain, the moon mass drivers aren't designed for this," Mike said, his voice shaking a little. "They were built to move or into orbit, not to tow spaceships. If we reverse the polarity and overcharge the magnetic field, we can create a localized gravity well. But it's dangerous. It might tear the moon apart. It might pull the Valiant apart, too." "Will it stop them?" Mark asked. "Yes. It will grab their ships and pull them back in like a magnet pulling iron filings. But the strain on the generators, it will be a one-way trip. The generators will burn out completely." Mark didn't hesitate. "Burn them out. We don't need the generators if the aliens destroy the Earth." "Do it, Mike." "Aye, Captain," Mike said. He turned to his console and started typing commands. "Overriding safety protocols. Unlocking magnetic locks. Diverting all power from the life support systems to the gravity emitters." On the bridge, the lights flickered and dimmed. The hum of the ship changed pitch, becoming a deep, throbbing vibration that made everyone's teeth ache. "Tell the Rooks to stay clear," Mark ordered. "Anyone within 50,000 kilometers of the gravity well is going to have a very bad day." In space, something strange began to happen. The moon, which had been a silent gray observer, suddenly seemed to pulse. Invisible waves of energy shot out from the massive mass driver stations hidden in the lunar craters. These waves struck the fleeing Xylarthian ships. The aliens were confused. Inside their silver ships, alarms were blaring. Their navigational computers were going crazy. One moment, they were accelerating toward freedom. The next moment, it felt like they were flying through thick mud. Their ships groaned under the stress. They were being pulled backward. "It's working!" shouted Lieutenant Sarah Blake from the tactical station. "Their velocity is dropping. They are being pulled into a decaying orbit." Ensign Lisa Ray, the communications officer, held up a hand. "Captain, I am slicing into their network. The encryption is breaking down because their systems are under so much stress. I can hear them." "Put it on speaker," Mark said. The bridge filled with the sound of the alien commander's voice. For the first time, the smooth, arrogant voice was gone. It was replaced by panic and fear. The translation computer struggled to keep up with the alien shouting. "What is this force?" the alien voice screamed. "Our engines are at maximum. Why are we moving backward? This is impossible. Our physics scans show a massive gravity spike. Are they using a black hole? Are these monsters using black hole technology?" Mark smiled coldly. "Not a black hole, Commander. Just human ingenuity." Mike Wilson yelled from the engineering console. "Captain, the gravity well is too strong. I can't stabilize it. It's pulling everything, including the debris field. If I don't stop it soon, it might snap the moon's orbit." "Hold it as long as you can," Mark ordered. The Xylarthian ships were trapped. They were caught in an invisible net of gravity, stuck between the Earth and the Moon. They were spinning out of control, colliding with each other. Their perfect formations were gone. They were sitting ducks. Suddenly, a massive burst of energy erupted from the lunar surface. One of the mass driver generators had exploded under the strain. A cloud of dust and rock rose from the moon. The gravity field fluctuated violently. "Mike!" Mark shouted. "I'm trying to compensate." Mike yelled back. "The main generator is dead. The field is collapsing, but the damage is done. They are stuck in the inner system. They can't run." On the screen, the explosion on the moon lit up the darkness. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight of orange and red fire against the gray dust. The sacrifice of the moon base had bought them time. Mark stood up. He walked to the main window, looking out at the trapped enemy fleet. They were drifting, helpless, their engines fighting a losing battle against the invisible pull of the dying gravity well. "Admiral," Mark said. "They are not going anywhere. They are confused, they are scared, and they are right where we want them." "Good work, Captain," Admiral Vance replied. "But what now? We have them trapped, but we can't keep them there forever." Mark looked at the tactical map. The red dots were huddled together, trying to figure out what was happening. They were like a swarm of angry bees caught in a jar. "Now," Mark said, his voice hard. "We finish this. We show them that when Earth fights, we don't leave survivors." He turned back to his crew. They looked tired, but their eyes were burning with determination. They were no longer just soldiers. They were the defenders of their home. They had pulled an entire alien fleet out of the sky with nothing but magnets and courage. "Ensign Blake," Mark said. "Prepare the firing solution for the Archangel Protocol." "The Archangel Protocol?" Sir Sarah asked. "But that uses the old orbital satellites. They aren't designed for warfare." We repurposed them, Mark said. And today, we find out if they work. The aliens were screaming over the comms again, demanding to know what was happening. They were terrified of the invisible force that had stopped them. They were calling humans monsters of physics. Mark listened to their fear and felt a grim satisfaction. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought humans were soft and weak. They didn't know that humans would destroy their own moon just to win a fight. Lock onto the largest ship, Mark commanded. Let's show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The Valiant adjusted its position. The railguns rotated, their barrels smoking from the earlier fire. The trapped alien fleet floated before them, unable to run, unable to hide. The hunt was over. The killing was about to begin. The name of the plan was Archangel. It was not a holy name, but a code word for a weapons system that humanity had kept hidden for decades. It was not a laser, nor a missile, nor a bomb. It was simply gravity. It was the secret weapon Earth had built hoping they would never have to use. Commander James Iron Miller sat in the control chair of the Archangel platform. His station was a small, cramped satellite hidden in a cluster of space junk. It looked like a pile of garbage from the outside, but inside, it held the most dangerous gun in the solar system. James was a big man, calm and steady. He had pressed the launch button before in simulations, but never in real life. Captain Sterling, this is Commander Miller, James said over the radio. Archangel is ready. The rock is in the chamber. On the bridge of the Valiant, Mark Sterling looked at the main screen. The Xylarthian fleet was trapped, huddled together like frightened sheep. They were firing their engines randomly, trying to break free of the gravity well that Mike Wilson had created. But it was useless. Target the flagship, James, Mark said. Let them know we mean business. Aye, Captain, James replied. He rested his hand on the large, red button. God forgive us. He pressed the button. Far away from the battle, the Archangel platform shuddered. It didn't fire a beam of light. Instead, it fired an electromagnet pulse. This pulse struck a massive rock that was parked in a higher orbit. This rock was not just a stone, it was an asteroid made of pure iron, roughly the size of a skyscraper. The pulse pushed the rock. At first, it moved slowly. Then, gravity took over. The rock began to fall. It was a simple weapon. It was just a big rock falling from the sky. But because it was in space, it didn't stop accelerating. It fell faster and faster. It became a hammer thrown by an angry god. Down on the bridge, Lieutenant Amy Chen was busy. She was the drone pilot. Her screen showed thousands of small dots. All drone wings, launch, Amy whispered into her headset. Swarm mode. From the hulls of the Valiant and the nearby Earth stations, millions of small devices were released. They were tiny, metal squares, no bigger than a playing card. They were not smart. They had no brains. They only had a simple instruction: find heat. Go to heat. Crash. The alien fleet saw the asteroid coming. They tried to shoot it down, but their lasers only heated the rock, making it glow. It was too big to destroy. The fear on the alien ships was reaching its peak. Then, the drones arrived. It was a cloud of black dust. The drones hit the alien ships like a plague of locusts. They clogged the enemy sensors. They flew into the engine vents and melted. They covered the laser turrets, blinding them. The aliens couldn't see to shoot the asteroid. They couldn't move to dodge. They were blind and helpless. They are panicking. Ensign Sarah Blake shouted. Their comms are wide open. The voice of the Xylarthian commander filled the bridge again. This time, the arrogance was completely gone. The voice was trembling, high-pitched with terror. Stop! Stop this madness! The alien screamed. We surrender. We yield. Do not fire the rock. We offer you everything. Technology. Resources. Medicine. We will serve you. Just stop the rock. The bridge crew fell silent. Admiral Vance's face appeared on the screen. Captain, the Admiral said, looking hopeful. They are surrendering. They are offering terms. We can end this now without more bloodshed. We can take their technology. Mark Sterling looked at the Admiral. Then he looked at the main screen. He watched the asteroid growing larger as it closed the distance. He thought about the cities on Earth. He thought about the people who had died when the aliens first arrived. He thought about the threat to destroy his world. Terms, Mark said softly. Yes, Captain. The alien voice begged. We will leave. We will never return. Just call off your weapons. Mark walked to the center of the bridge. He looked at the terrified faces of his crew. He looked at Tom Davis on the fighter screen. He looked at Amy Chen, who was crying as she piloted the deadly swarm. Admiral, Mark said. You asked for terms. Did they give us terms when they told us to surrender in 20 seconds? No, John Vance whispered. They did not. Mark looked straight at the camera, knowing the alien commander was listening. You had your chance to talk, Mark said. His voice was as cold as the space outside. You had 20 seconds. You chose to threaten us. Now you have our full attention. Captain, wait. The Admiral shouted. We can't destroy the whole fleet. We can, Mark said. And we will. He turned to James Miller. Commander, maintain course. Aye, Captain, James replied. Impact in 10 seconds. The asteroid, glowing red from the heat of re-entry into the alien formation, slammed into the Xylarthian flagship. It was a collision that defied description. There was no sound, just the silent violence of physics. The iron rock tore through the silver ship like a bullet through paper. The flagship didn't just break, it evaporated. The kinetic energy turned the ship into a ball of expanding plasma. The shock wave hit the ships around it, shattering their hulls. The drones followed, crashing into the damaged ships, finding the weak spots, tearing them apart. On the bridge, the light from the explosion was so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. Direct hit, Amy Chen said, her voice quiet. Primary target eliminated. Mark watched the debris field expand. The mightiest ship in the Xylarthian fleet was now just a cloud of dust. The remaining ships, the ones that weren't destroyed by the blast, were drifting without power. They were dead in the water. Status report, Mark asked. Enemy fleet is 90% destroyed, Sarah Blake reported. The rest are disabled. They have no power. They are floating. Mark let out a long breath. He sat down in his chair. His hands were steady, but he felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had just given the order to wipe out an entire fleet. There was no glory in it, only necessity. The alien voice on the radio was gone. Only static remained. Admiral, Mark said. It seems they won't be surrendering today. John Vance looked at the captain. He looked shocked, but he also looked relieved. You did it, Captain. You actually did it. I told you, Admiral, Mark said, looking out at the stars. We don't do well with ultimatums. The battle was over. The silence of space returned, but now it was the silence of a graveyard. Earth was safe, but the universe now knew that humanity was not to be trifled with. Humanity was the species that threw rocks when the odds were bad. Humanity was the species that chose collision. Captain, Mike Wilson's voice came over the comms. He sounded tired. The gravity generator is officially dead. We are drifting. That's okay, Mike, Mark said. We won. Mark Sterling leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. The fight was done, but the cleanup was just beginning. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he wondered if this was just the first wave. But if it was, humanity would be ready. The silence that followed the battle was heavy. The bright explosions had faded into the darkness of space, leaving behind nothing but drifting debris and twisted metal. The massive Xylarthian fleet, which had looked like a silver wall of death just hours ago, was now a junkyard. The UES Valiant floated among the wreckage, its lights dim but steady. Inside the ship, the mood was strange. Nobody cheered. Everyone was too tired. The adrenaline that had kept them going was fading, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion. Captain Mark Sterling sat in his chair, staring at the main screen. He watched as the rescue ships moved in, picking up escape pods from the destroyed alien vessels. We have survivors, Lieutenant Sarah Blake said softly. She was rubbing her eyes, which were red from staring at monitors for too long. Their life signs are weak, but they are alive. Mark nodded slowly. Bring them aboard. Put them in the cargo hold. Maximum security. On the screen, the face of Admiral John Vance appeared. The Admiral looked like he had aged 10 years in one day. Captain, the world is watching. The news channels are broadcasting the footage of the wreckage. People are scared, but they are also proud. Tell them to stay inside, Mark said. We aren't safe yet. There might be more of them out there. Hours passed. The surviving Xylarthian officers were brought to the Valiant. There were 5 of them. They did not look like the proud invaders from the broadcast. Their uniforms were torn, and their bodies were bruised. They trembled as they walked, their large eyes darting around the human ship with terror. Mark stood in the cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary interrogation room. He stood with his arms crossed. Mike Wilson, the engineer, stood nearby, holding a heavy wrench. Tom Hammer Davis was also there, cleaning his fingernails with a knife, looking casually dangerous. The Xylarthian leader, a tall creature with pale gray skin, looked at Mark. The alien used a small device to translate its language into English. You are monsters, the alien leader said. The voice was trembling. We studied you. We saw your wars. We thought you were divided. We thought we could break you. Mark stepped closer. You made a mistake. You thought division meant weakness. But for humans, fighting is how we learn. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We got very good at it. Why did you not surrender? The alien asked. There was genuine confusion in its voice. We gave you a chance to live. Your destruction was illogical. Your survival probability was 0. You chose collision over safety. Why? Mark looked at the alien. He looked at the fear in the creature's eyes. It was a fear of the unknown, the fear of something the alien could not understand. Because we don't serve, Mark said simply. Because on Earth, we have a saying. It is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. You came here to own us. You don't own us. No one owns us. Mike Wilson grunted. And besides, the engineer added. You guys were really annoying. The alien leader looked down at the floor. We will tell the others. The collective will know of this world. They will avoid it? Mark shook his head. No. You won't tell them to avoid us. You are going to tell them the truth. You are going to tell them that Earth is not a resource. It is a trap. Tell them that if they come here, they will not find slaves. They will find a fight. We will tell them, the alien promised. Mark waved his hand. Take them away. The guards led the trembling aliens away. The cargo bay was quiet again. Tom put his knife back in his pocket. Is it over? Captain Tom asked. Did we win? Mark looked at the ceiling, thinking about the millions of people on the blue planet below. He thought about the destroyed cities and the lives lost. They had paid a high price for this day. We won the battle, Mark said. But the war just started. Today, the galaxy learned that humanity exists. Today, they learned that we are dangerous. Some will be afraid. Others will want to test us. To see if we are really that strong. He walked toward the exit, and his crew followed him. They walked through the corridors of the ship. The metal walls were scratched and scorched, but the ship was still standing. Just like the people inside it. They arrived back on the bridge. Admiral Vance was on the screen again. Captain, the governments are meeting tomorrow to discuss the future, the Admiral said. They want to talk about building more ships. More weapons. They want to use the alien technology we captured. Good, Mark said. He sat in his chair. It felt comfortable now. We have a lot of work to do. Mark looked out the forward window. The stars were bright and beautiful. Before, they had seemed distant and uncaring. Now, they looked like a challenge. A vast ocean waiting for humanity to sail it. Admiral, send a message to the fleet, Mark said. Tell all crews to rest. Tell them they did a good job. And what about you, Captain? Mark smiled a small, tired smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigar he had been saving for a special occasion. It was a bit crushed, but it was still good. I'm going to sit here for a while, Mark said. I'm going to look at the stars. And I'm going to enjoy the view. He lit the cigar. The smoke drifted up in the zero gravity, forming a small cloud. The bridge crew watched him. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were veterans. They were the first line of defense for a new era. Humanity had been given 20 seconds to surrender. They had chosen collision instead. And in that collision, they had forged a new destiny. They were no longer just a small blue dot in the corner of the galaxy. They were the hunters. They were the survivors. They were the species that said no. Navigation, Mark said, exhaling a puff of smoke. Ready, Captain, Sarah replied. Set a course for home, Mark ordered. Slow and steady. We have a lot of rebuilding to do. The UES Valiant turned its battered nose toward Earth. Behind it, the wreckage of the alien fleet floated as a monument to the day humanity refused to bow. It was a silent warning to the rest of the universe, do not tread on us. Mark Sterling took another puff of his cigar. The fight was finished. But the story of humanity was just beginning.